There is a set of additional interactive elements that you can add to a call or a meeting in Skype for Business that I want to explore. These elements are the whiteboard, polls, and Q&A. Before we jump in, I do want to mention that the Q&A feature is one of those things that will not be available to all Skype for Business users. And I should also mention that these features only work on the Windows application. They do not work on the Mac. So like most things that we've seen in this chapter, these will work in any type of call or meeting with any number of people. But some of these are most useful with large groups. So just to see how it works, I want to start an instant messaging conversation with at least 2 other people. So I'll start by selecting one person on my contacts list. I'll hold the Control key on my keyboard and select another person. With these 2 people selected, I'll right-click on one of them. I could start an audio call or a video call. But let's just do an IM conversation. And I'll write a quick message here in this conversation. And naturally, the other participants will receive notifications, which they can accept. We've seen this before. And when they write a response, I'll see them here. So now that the conversation is started, we can start looking at these interactive features, starting with the whiteboard. So I'm going to go down to this button down in the bottom of the window. This is the Present button. On some systems, this will be labeled as Share. I'm going to click on that to open the menu, and I want to go to the option labeled More. And here I can choose Whiteboard, Poll, or Q&A. And remember, the Q&A feature is not going to be available on all systems. But I want to start with the whiteboard, so I'm just going to click on that, and it will immediately jump me over to the whiteboard view. Now, what I see here on my screen is the same thing that the other participants see. This is a shared whiteboard. It's pretty much just like having a whiteboard in a physical conference room. I've got a bunch of tools over here on the left side. I usually just grab the pen tool and start drawing something. So maybe I want to draw some sort of flow chart here, so I can start sketching that out. And of course, you can do this with a mouse, but it will be a lot easier if you're using a computer with a tablet stylus or touch controls. So I can start drawing something here, and if other users looking at this whiteboard start drawing things, then every other participant will see those pop up on their screen as well. And that's pretty much the core of the whiteboard. I'm not going to go through all of the features. We need to save some time for polls and Q&A, but you can explore and look at the options here yourself. For now, let's go into one of the other options. So I'm going to go back down to the Share or Present button, back to the More option, and this time I'm going to choose a poll. When you do a poll, you get to write a question and then several possible answers. So let's start by filling in a question. If this were a staff meeting, I might write a question like this. After you write in the question, you can start writing in several different choices. When you finish filling in all this information, you can hit Create, and then that poll will be visible to everybody in the conversation. And it will look the same on everybody else's screen as it looks here on mine. And so anybody in this conversation can click on one of these options to vote, and then we'll see these percentages calculate out accordingly. And in case you're wondering, even the person who started the poll can answer it. So I could even click on an option here on my screen, and those percentages will calculate in my answer. Okay, now let's do a Q&A. So I'm going to go down to that Share or Present button again, back to the More option, and we're going to choose Q&A. And if you do not see the Q&A option and you think that you need it, then you should talk to your Microsoft administrator and see if they can enable that for you. So I'll choose Q&A. And again, everybody is seeing a screen just like this. There's a field where people can ask questions, and then we'll have an opportunity to answer those questions. When you're in the Q&A session, the instant messaging tool will be turned off. And it will stay turned off until you choose to stop the Q&A, which you can do by hitting this button. If you have an audio call or a video call active, that will keep going. It's just the instant message that will turn off during Q&A. So let's give the other people in this conversation an opportunity to ask their questions. All they need to do is type in that field, then press Enter, and that will submit their question. So now I can see questions from both of my other participants, and if I want to answer one of these questions, I can hit the Answer button here and type in my response. Type in my response and press Enter. and everybody in the conversation can see that response. So now we've seen these three options, but there's something else that we should see before we finish. I started a whiteboard, I started a poll, and I started a Q&A session. And these all remain active until I close them or until we end this meeting. So they're still active even though we don't necessarily see them. If I want to switch back over to one of those items, I can go back to the Share or Present button, open up this menu, and choose the option that says Manage Content. And I can see all three of those items listed here. I can see that the poll is currently active. It says Now Showing. And there's a button underneath each of these that I can click to start presenting that content. Now, if I were to just hit this now, it's not going to work as you might expect because I cannot switch over to the whiteboard or the poll if the Q&A is currently active. So let me close this for now. I'm going to go back to the Q&A and I'm just going to hit Stop Q&A. You'll see it reverts back over to the poll. But if I go back to that menu, back to Manage Content, I can see all three are listed here. If I want to switch to make the whiteboard active, I can click on this button under the whiteboard, and it switches to the whiteboard. I can close that to see it better. Or I can go back into Manage Content, and if I just want to close one of these, I can hit the X below it, hit OK to confirm, and it has closed that Q&A. And I can close the others or switch between them from here. Using whiteboards, polls, and Q&A sessions, you've got some options for increased interactivity and information gathering during your Skype for Business calls and meetings.